The storm came suddenly, sweeping across the Montana plains with a fury few had seen in years. By late evening, the roads were buried under thick snow, winds howled through the trees, and most of the town's lights were already out. In a small farmhouse on the edge of the valley, Evelyn Harper, a 78-year-old widow, sat knitting by her fireplace. The warm crackle of wood was her only company, and outside, the world looked like an endless sheet of white. Evelyn's life had been quiet for decades. Since her husband passed, her days were filled with tending her small garden, feeding the chickens, and writing letters to her grandchildren. She enjoyed the solitude, but on that stormy night, her world was about to collide with something she could never have imagined. Around midnight, she heard it, the deep low rumble that didn't belong to the storm. At first, she thought it was thunder, but thunder doesn't growl in waves, rising and falling like an approaching army. She walked to the window, pulled aside the curtain, and gasped. Out of the snowy haze came the blinding glow of headlights. One by one, motorcycles emerged, their engines struggling against the storm. Soon, 15 bikers in heavy leather jackets and helmets pulled into her driveway. The snow swirled around them, their massive frames dusted in white, their patches clearly visible. Hell's Angels. Most people would have panicked. Most would have locked the door, turned off the lights, and prayed the men would move on. But Evelyn was not most people. She opened her door wide, letting the cold air rush in. The bikers slowed, exchanging glances. They weren't used to such a welcome. Their leader, a towering man with a black beard and eyes as sharp as steel, stepped forward. His name, everyone in the biker world knew, was Tank. "Ma'am," Tank said cautiously, "we don't mean trouble. We just need somewhere to wait out this storm. The roads are iced over." Evelyn studied him for a moment, then gave a gentle smile. "Trouble or not, you'll freeze to death out there. Come in, boys. I've got a fire going." And with those few words, the unlikeliest story of kindness began. The bikers filed into the farmhouse, ducking slightly to fit through the small doorway. They looked out of place. Giant men covered in tattoos, their boots caked with snow, standing awkwardly in Evelyn's cozy living room, decorated with family photos and lace curtains. They shuffled off their gloves, stamping their boots. Evelyn shut the door firmly behind them, keeping the storm at bay. "Now, sit down before you catch your death," she instructed, her tone as commanding as any grandmother's. Tank gave a small nod, and the bikers obeyed, sitting on chairs, couches, even the floor. Their presence made the tiny house feel full, almost bursting. Evelyn, however, moved around as calmly as if she were hosting tea with old friends. From her kitchen, she pulled out loaves of bread, jars of jam, and cold cuts from the fridge. "It's not much," she said, "but it'll fill your stomachs." She set mugs on the table, filled them with steaming cocoa, and handed them out. The bikers exchanged glances. These men were used to suspicion, to people crossing the street when they walked by. They weren't used to being served hot chocolate in flower-patterned mugs. One of the younger bikers muttered, "Ma'am, why are you doing this? You don't even know us." Evelyn chuckled softly. "Because kindness doesn't cost me a thing. You needed shelter. That's all I need to know." The men ate quietly at first, their deep voices hushed, as though afraid to break the spell of the moment. Tank sat nearest the fire, studying Evelyn carefully. "You should know, people don't usually welcome us like this," he said. Evelyn shrugged. "People judge too quickly. I don't see bikers. I see 15 cold men who needed a roof. That's enough for me." The bikers, hardened by years of the road, found themselves softening in her presence. For the first time in a long time, they felt like guests, like family even. Tank finally allowed himself a small grin. "You're one brave lady, Mrs. Harper." She poured him another cup of cocoa and winked. "Brave? Well, maybe, but more likely just stubborn. My husband always said I had more courage than sense." The room filled with laughter, and just like that, the wall between them began to crumble. As the storm outside reached its peak, Evelyn's little farmhouse became a refuge from the cold. The men sprawled across chairs and rugs, steam rising from their mugs, their leather jackets drying near the fire. What had started as a tense, uncertain meeting was slowly turning into something none of them expected. A night of connection. Tank leaned back, his broad shoulders hunched slightly as he stared into the flames. "No one's ever let us in like this," he admitted quietly. "We're used to people slamming doors in our faces." Evelyn glanced at him with her warm, grandmotherly smile. "Maybe that's because people see patches and tattoos before they see people. I don't care about jackets, dear. I care about hearts. And right now I see 15 hearts in need of a little warmth." The bikers shifted uncomfortably, unused to such words. One of them, a younger man named Ricky, spoke up. "My own mom won't even let me in her house anymore. She says I've made too many bad choices." His voice cracked slightly, and he quickly looked away. Evelyn reached over, patted his massive hand, and said, "Well, Ricky, this house doesn't turn anyone away. Tonight, you're home." The men fell silent. Some stared at the fire. Others blinked back memories they'd buried for years. Slowly, stories began to flow. Tales of roads traveled, brothers lost, and families left behind. Their voices, usually rough and loud, softened in Evelyn's presence. They laughed at old adventures, shared scars and their meanings, even argued playfully over who rode faster. Evelyn listened as though she had all the time in the world. To her, these weren't outlaws. They were just lost boys who'd grown into men without much kindness along the way. Before long, the farmhouse was filled with an unusual sight. A gang of bikers peacefully dozing off, some on couches, others on the rug, boots still on. The storm outside raged, but inside was warmth, peace, and even a strange sense of family. Evelyn sat in her rocking chair, watching them with a smile. For the first time in years, her little home wasn't quiet or lonely. Instead, it was alive, with laughter, with stories, with company. As she pulled a blanket over one biker's shoulders, she whispered softly, "Everyone needs shelter sometimes, even angels on wheels." 4. By morning, the snow had stopped. A pale sunlight filtered through the frosted windows, casting golden light across the farmhouse. The bikers stirred awake, groaning and stretching, their tough exteriors momentarily replaced with the vulnerability of men who had finally slept deeply. Evelyn was already in the kitchen, apron tied neatly, humming a hymn as she flipped pancakes on the griddle. The smell of bacon and fresh coffee drifted through the house, pulling the bikers to the table like children. Tank entered first, rubbing his eyes. "Ma'am, you didn't have to—" "Hush," Evelyn interrupted, placing a steaming plate of food in front of him. "You boys need energy for the road." Soon the table was filled with towering plates of pancakes, scrambled eggs, and thick slices of toast. The bikers ate hungrily, yet politely, as though instinctively respecting the woman who had shown them more kindness than most had in years. When the last bite was eaten and the last sip of coffee gone, Tank reached into his jacket. He pulled out a thick roll of cash, setting it firmly on the table. "Ma'am, we don't take charity. You've done more than enough for us. Let us pay you back." Evelyn shook her head firmly. "Not a penny. You needed help, and I gave it. That's what neighbors do." The bikers looked stunned. Men who lived by a code of honor were suddenly faced with a woman whose honor outshone theirs. Tank cleared. His throat clearly moved. "I don't know what to say." Evelyn smiled, her eyes twinkling. "Then don't say anything. Just promise me you'll ride safe and maybe one day do something kind for someone else." The men nodded. And with that, the bikers began preparing to leave. Engines roared to life, the sound echoing down the valley. Evelyn waved from her porch as they rode off into the morning sun, their figures shrinking into the horizon. She thought that was the end of the story, but she was wrong. What she didn't know was that her act of kindness had planted a seed in the hearts of men who rarely felt warmth from the world. That seed was about to grow in ways no one could have predicted. The next morning, Evelyn was sipping tea when she heard it again, the unmistakable rumble of motorcycles. At first, she frowned. Could the bikers have gotten stuck in the snow and returned? But as the sound grew louder, she realized this was different, much louder, much bigger. She walked to the porch and froze. Down the long country road, as far as her eyes could see, came a line of motorcycles, dozens, then more, then more. The sun glinted off chrome, and the roar shook the ground beneath her feet. Within minutes, 100 bikes had pulled into her driveway in the fields around her house. It was a sight so powerful, so overwhelming, it looked like a scene from a movie. At the front was Tank, his beard gleaming in the sunlight, a proud smile on his face. "Good morning, Mrs. Harper," he said, swinging off his bike. Evelyn clutched her shawl. "What on earth is all this?" Tank's voice softened. "Word got out about what you did for us. Every chapter in the area wanted to come and thank you. We're not used to kindness, ma'am. You treated us like family. Now you've got a family 100 strong." Evelyn's eyes welled with tears. The bikers began dismounting, each one carrying something in their hands. One brought flowers, another brought groceries, others carried firewood, supplies, even tools. They placed them on her porch, stacking gifts higher and higher until it looked like she'd prepared for an entire winter. Neighbors peeked from their windows, jaws dropping at the sight of the infamous Hell's Angels lined up respectfully at Evelyn Harper's door. For once, the bikers weren't feared. They were admired. Tank took Evelyn's frail hands in his massive, tattooed ones. "You gave us shelter in the storm. Now we're giving you our word. You'll never be alone again." The sound of 100 men cheering filled the valley. Evelyn, overwhelmed, could only whisper, "Bless your hearts." 6. From that day on, Evelyn Harper was no longer just a widow in a quiet farmhouse. She became the beloved grandmother of an entire biker brotherhood. The Angels kept their promise. Every few days, a bike or two would roll down her road. Sometimes it was to drop off groceries, and sometimes it was to chop wood. Other times it was just to sit on her porch and share stories over tea. When her roof leaked, they fixed it. When her car broke down, they rebuilt it. When winter came again, she never had to shovel snow. 100 bikers made sure her driveway was always clear. The town, once wary of the Angels, began to see them differently. They saw them escorting Evelyn to church on Sundays, a protective circle of motorcycles roaring gently behind her. They saw them carry her bags from the market, mow her lawn, and wave respectfully at her neighbors. The woman who had once lived alone now had a loyal army at her side. Reporters eventually got wind of the story. A local news station asked Evelyn why she opened her home that night instead of locking her door. Her answer touched millions. "You don't judge people by their jackets or their patches. You judge them by their hearts. And those boys have the biggest hearts I've ever known." Tank, standing proudly beside her, added simply, "She gave us warmth when the world gave us cold." The story of Evelyn Harper and her Hells Angels family spread far beyond Montana. It became a reminder that kindness, even the smallest act, can ripple outwards in ways no one expects. And so the storm, that could have been just another lonely night, became the spark for a lifelong bond. One old lady, 15 bikers, and then 100 more. Proof that sometimes the most unexpected friendships are the strongest. Evelyn often said to visitors, "The night I opened my door, I thought I was just letting in some cold, tired men. What I got, instead, was family." And in their world of roaring engines and endless roads, the Angels knew they had found something just as rare, a home.